All right, hello, I'm Dylan.
All right, welcome to the Totally Tangential Podcast. My name is Jonathan,
And my name is Dylan.
and is this the last episode of the podcast? Well, you'll have to keep listening to find out. But before we actually get onto the topic for today, yeah, I've totally kept you in the dark. You're probably really confused.
I am very confused. Like, I don't think this is the last episode of the podcast, not that I know of.
I'm making an executive decision. Not just kidding. Point being, before we get to the meat of that and actually pay off on that huge cliffhanger, how you been?
I've been pretty good. How about yourself?
Honestly, been pretty good as well.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I have plenty of things I could get into, but like, you go ahead if you got something.
Well, one thing that I'll tell you is I think I've told you before that there was a board game that we were playing for a while, and just she and I, my girlfriend and I, have been trying to play more board games. And the ones that we have been playing kind of like ran their course, not as entertaining as anymore, and all that stuff. So I found out from one of the ones that we did play that she really likes like resource management kind of board games, because the one that we did have was like pseudo resource management. So I was thinking like, okay, a lot of those can be two players. Some of them need three or more. But I had looked up before of like, what are some of the top resource management games? What are some of the top two-player games? So I think last weekend I decided to go to, or 4th of July, 4th of July, because we had the day off from work. So went to the board game store that's not too far from the house, and we got the one that ends up being like, if you look up online for best two-player games, best resource management games, it's often like rated in the top spot or top five. But it's called Terraforming Mars. Have you heard of it?
I actually have. I've never played it, but let me look up a picture of it and go in and
Yeah.
keep talking about it.
But it's just been super fun. I will say the one, like, this could be a plus or it could be a minus depending on what you're looking for. But even as a two-player thing, this thing takes like 90 minutes to 2 hours. So, the other board games that we played normally are like 1 hour sessions. So if we want to do two or three, it's easy. Where this one, if you finish a game after like 2 hours and it's just like you're ready for another 2 hours right off the bat, you really have to, like, you cannot do that on the weekday. You need the weekend for it. But it's been super fun. The other resource management game that we played was pretty simple. So this one has a lot more complexities to it. That it doesn't make it too hard to learn by any means, but it's something where some of the other ones you kind of tell like by the last quarter of the game of like, okay, now we're just going through the motions. We pretty much know who's going to win. Where last night we did end up playing two games, and for both of them, like, I had scored 80 points, she had scored 84, or vice versa, where like we did not know until the very end, where we were like counting up all of the extra points that you get at the end from this and this, who was going to win. So there's a lot more strategy to it. There's a lot more into the game. It takes longer and all that stuff, but it's a super satisfying game.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that, and I've heard really good things about the game. It's evidence that I'm not a huge board game guy, and I've even heard of it.
Hmm.
But I feel like games like that, there's a sweet spot with games where it's accessible the first or second playthrough,
Hmm.
but there's just so much depth that even by like the fifth or sixth, you're still learning new things.
Hmm.
And it sounds like this one is, kind of hitting that sweet spot.
Yeah, it really is, because the first game that we did play, there were mistakes that happened, but the second game that we played, pretty much everything was figured out. That's kind of what I've realized about most big boy board games, things that aren't just like Monopoly or Scrabble, is that most of the time, with how many rules are in there, like just the way that they word everything and certain things that need to like become more natural to you, the first or second game are almost just always like still the learning process.
Yeah, honestly. But like once you figure it out and get going, it's pretty fun. You just got to get over that initial like kind of overwhelming hurdle.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But what about you? You have any new sexy board games or things of the like within the past week?
Not a sexy board game, but I found out I have a debilitating illness.
Oh, is it why this is the last episode of the podcast potentially?
Yeah, I'm not gonna make it to next week, Dylan.
Oh, thank
No,
God.
all jokes aside, so I'm not gonna see a doctor for an official diagnosis because you'll see why. Don't worry.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm going to unofficially say I have exploding head syndrome.
Okay, go on.
I'm just gonna have you take a guess as to what it is before I tell you what it actually is.
Okay, well, the first thing that comes to my mind is we both grew up, watching cartoons and all that stuff, and I'm sure that you were a big Nickelodeon boy. And for advertisements, a thing that I'm not sure if it's still advertised anymore because I also never see it at the store, but Airheads. The chewy taffy-esque things commercials always had commercials where someone would take a bite out of it and then their head would swell up like an airhead and often explode at the end. So yeah, you bit into an airhead and now your days are numbered. That's my guess.
Yeah, that's why I'm not making it to next week. Weren't there also, was it Airheads or a different one where the kids would throw it on the ground, they stomp on it, and then I don't know if they blow up or if they turn flat or something. Maybe it was a different candy.
It wasn't even a candy. You're wrong. It was like a juice pouch because the tagline was "Respect the pouch." Respect it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Shoot, what thing was that though? I don't remember the name of it.
I think it was just Capri Suns.
You know what? I think you're right. I think it was.
Yeah, because I remember Capri Suns very vividly, because you and I weren't friends at this point. We didn't know each other yet. But in elementary school, because I'm a picky eater, and I was even pickier back then, but I had friends come over to my house all the time, so I had my mom buy the jumbo packs of Capri Suns that, had 12 or 16 in them, just so I had another reason for friends to come over. Just like, hey, if you come over, we have Capri Suns. They're all yours, because I don't drink Capri Suns. So my mom would, religiously buy Capri Suns, not for me, but for my friends.
That's actually so nice, though.
Yeah. I mean, she would buy you, pink lemonade when you came over, right?
Yeah, she always would, and I always really appreciate it, because at that point, I did care about my health, but I let a lot slide when it came to, lemonade specifically.
Okay.
I don't know, because it was it was a friend hangout. I have a good diet most of the time, so I'm going to make it one hell of a cheat day and just drink an entire thing of lemonade and probably get 300 grams of sugar.
Yeah, especially because now you have a bit more friends that you hang out with, but in high school, you had friends, but I'm pretty sure me and then maybe one other friend, but beyond that, you didn't go over to anyone's house, and you definitely didn't want people to go over to your house.
Yeah, well, part of it's just because at the time I didn't drive, and I didn't really want my, just complications with family, but now that I have full freedom, ooh, boy, I'm a wild boy. I'm a wild child, like Tarzan.
Dude, I still love that in high school, after you dropped out, quote unquote, that your parents still picked me up from school every other day despite not needing to pick you up at all. It's just hi, Jonathan's mom and dad. How's it going?
I wasn't even there all the time.
Yeah, it was something.
Yeah, and then they would get you food, sometimes when I'm not there, if I'm not mistaken. I'd be salty about that.
Yeah, and then your mom would complain to the Sonic staff of hey, last time we came here, we didn't get the wings that we wanted. Oh, would you like free wings then?
Did you know that my mom's name is secretly Karen?
Apparently, yeah.
But going back on topic, see, this is why we're totally tangential.
Yeah.
Exploding head syndrome.
Oh yeah, I forgot we were talking about that.
Yeah, I'll just describe to you what's happening. So I'll be sleeping, and I hear someone knock on my window, and it freaks me out. And I want to wake up and look who is at my window, but I can't. I can't move, and I'm thinking, Jonathan, we need to look at it. But I have so much anxiety until I'm just okay, come on, break free, and then it happens, and I spasm and jerk all my muscles. I shoot up, and I instantly look towards my window, and no one's there. So I look out the window, and nothing's disturbed. No one could have been near the window, and it's shoot, what could that have been? I don't believe in ghosts, so I don't think it's a ghost, but I don't know, did someone just pull a prank, knock on my window and run? So I after it happening the fifth or sixth time, which is not consecutively, it's over its period of months, but I looked it up and I found out exploding head syndrome is a sleep disorder in which you hear imaginary, very loud and startling noises. And since it's imaginary, obviously, no one else is there. It'll typically be very loud or even explosive sounding, like a crashing noise. And typically, very common things that go along with it are sleep paralysis, extreme anxiety, and then, I don't know, muscle spasms and everything, rapid heartbeat, sweating, that kind of thing. I'm wow, that is a pretty one-to-one diagnosis right there. But when I looked it up, it basically said, yeah, there's literally no treatment. Also, it's not severe enough to really get diagnosed, and it has no actual effect on your health or day to day, really, other than you're probably pretty frightened for a few minutes after you wake up.
Gotcha.
So I'm not going to see a doctor about it because there's nothing to be done about it. But it's I could say I probably have exploding head syndrome. That's extremely misleading, and it's going to be kind of funny to tell people.
It is, but I'm glad that it said that it was related to sleep paralysis, because literally the whole time that you were describing this was like, man, this sounds like sleep paralysis or sleep paralysis adjacent. So.
Yeah, and I think the key thing that makes a difference probably is it being spurred by hearing a loud noise that isn't there, because otherwise I've never had natural sleep paralysis until I started having this, which is a pretty recent thing within the last year or two.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, it's pretty frightening, but also it doesn't really bother me because it's I don't know, maybe I have it once every 3 months. Okay. So it's not a big deal. It's just kind of funny.
I mean, you said it's been happening in the past year or two, which does just so happen to line up with when you started exclusively sleeping in your car. So maybe that would have something to do with it.
Yeah, I think it's an anxiety thing about fearing people knocking on my window, because it could be police, it could be another person, who knows.
Mm-hmm. For sure. But yeah, you've always had weird sleep things, because I do remember when you were living at my place for those few months that I would just see you for the few times that I was awake earlier than you, often because I stayed up all night.
Yeah.
You would just you would just move your head into your pillow and then just motorboat it and go as you're shaking your face into your pillow, and it was hilarious to watch every time.
Well, little did you know, I was having a dream that I was in a Gretzko.
Oh, okay. So that would make sense then.
But all jokes aside, I'll actually go into this a little more because, hell, I find this to be an interesting subject. Mm. I actually do have really weird dream things. I think I mentioned it to you, but I have the ability to if I really put my mind to it and get enough sleep, I can choose what I dream about going into the sleep. Mm-hmm. And quite often, if I actually get to the point of doing that, I'm aware that it's a dream.
Yeah.
But it's not I can actually get full on lucid dreaming where I can affect everything at will. I can't do that. But I know that it's a dream, and importantly, if something goes wrong, with extreme consistency, I can rewind it, time travel, go back in time, and keep redoing it till I get an outcome I like.
That is interesting. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. That's, have you always been to do that, or is that more of a recent thing?
No, I've been able to do it since middle school. But I have to do a very deliberate process when I'm falling asleep to make it happen, because otherwise it won't always happen. It doesn't happen often now. With work, I'm just not getting enough sleep, and also because I'm in my car, I'm not getting the most restful sleep. Mm-hmm. But when I sleep in a bed or a couch or something, I can do it pretty much at will, at least 50% consistency, and it's pretty fun. I get to come up with whatever scenario I want and replay it, whatever. It's pretty great.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. I will say, since you brought it up, I forgot, as far as restful sleep goes in your car, are you able to fully sprawl out in your car? I know that you're not the tallest person and you have that back, but at the same time, I mean, by back, I mean the back of your car is fairly open. But at the same time, even then, it's only so big. Can you actually fully sprawl out in there?
Yeah, so for the first year, I laid across my back seats, and that was extremely uncomfortable, and eventually I said, well, why am I even doing this? So for the second year on, I drive a station wagon, so I can just lay my back seats forward, and so it is long enough that I can fully sprawl out. The only issue is it is at an angle, which is kind of odd.
Okay.
But, it's... I don't know, it's doable, and it's a lot more comfortable than across the back seat.
Yeah, I can imagine, because as you recall, when I was going to one of the colleges that I went to, I drove there at 4 in the morning, because if I drove there at 5 in the morning, it was a 2-hour trip. If I drove at 4, it was a 30-minute trip, thanks Los Angeles traffic. So I would drive at 4 in the morning, it would take 30 minutes, but then I'd have 3 hours until my next class, so I would just sleep in my car. But I just had a 4-door Mazda or whatever, so I would sprawl out in really weird ways of just sometimes half of my body was on the floor, sometimes half of it was was on the seats, and sometimes I'd be going from like the front seat to the back seat, and it was just like, it was always uncomfortable. But I was only sleeping there for 3 hours, and that was only like, 2 days a week for one semester. You sleeping in, granted you have a bigger car, but for 2 years
Yeah.
sleeping in the car, it's just like, I cannot imagine it, man.
You genuinely do adapt to it, though. Like, you genuinely stop thinking about it till you tell someone new about it, and they're like, oh my god, are you okay? And you're like, I guess. Honestly, it doesn't really cross my mind.
I mean, also for you, the bar of okay is kind of low. Like, have you ever been okay, Jonathan?
I am doing it fantastic right now. This is the best moment of my life, the conversation I hold most dear.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I
Well,
hope you remember that.
well, I won't need to because we're posting it on YouTube. But yeah.
We're not transitioning yet. I have one more thing to say on this.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. So okay, then go ahead.
Yeah. So I was gonna say about first cars and everything. Like, this really has been the ideal first car for me, given like sleeping circumstances. Because it was between this and my grandfather was gonna give me a Pontiac. Like, it was a 2-door, and just thought of trying to get that situated for it. The Pontiac was the newer car, it was the nicer car, and the car worth more money. But ironically, given my exact like life circumstances, the only thing that might have been better would have been an SUV. But otherwise, like, I mean, this gets better gas mileage than an SUV anyways. So this has been like the perfect first car for me. So unintentionally, he did great. So thank you, Grandpa. Rest in power.
Rest in power. Okay. That actually does make me think of something, which is you live in your car, and you are someone.
Oh, no. I live with my parents. I sleep in my car.
Okay, so you live in your car, and you're an extreme cheapskate when it comes to trying to spend money on anything, including the basics. So,
Yep.
I'm curious. Like, assuming that the location that you were in made it feasible and all of that stuff, could you see yourself, like, being an RV person of just, like, well, you already sleep in your car, and hey, you can get running water in an RV and this and that, and I'm sure it's less expensive than buying a house, especially when you're living in California at the moment. So, yeah, have you ever considered that, or, like, not really something that you'd consider too much?
I have considered it actually a pretty good bit in light of recent events, and I firmly decided actually probably not.
Okay,
Because,
why?
like, an RV is a financial investment, and if I'm already investing that much money, I feel like I may as well just get a full-blown house at that point. Like, I know it's a significantly different price point, but, like, RVs are not cheap, especially once, like, if I actually wanted to live a mobile lifestyle and have one big enough to where I'd be able to have a good amount of personal possessions in it. Because, like, the key thing right now is, like, I'm saving money, but my personal possessions are, like, in a house, blah, blah, blah. So, like, if I actually want to bring my personal possessions, I want to have a good space for it. I want to be something I'd be comfortable bringing other people into. I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with that with an RV. I'd be like a redneck. But I think you get the idea.
Yeah, well, then I'm curious because I just looked up RVs can cost between $10,000 and $300,000 depending on the style and features. So obviously there's a price range there, but you cannot find a house in California for $10,000. Like, even if you're just trying to find a condo in the shitty city that you live in, it's probably going to cost upwards of $100,000. So with that being the case, I mean, you could still hypothetically have the car that you have now and have like a, smallish RV that's just purely used as a house for, let's say, $15,000 or something. You don't need it brand new unless it's a piece of shit otherwise. Would you consider getting an RV purely as just a house that is cheaper and not have to worry about the mobility and all that stuff about it?
I could consider that. Particularly depending on what my lifestyle is looking like. Like, if I have to, like, go somewhere for college or, like, unsure about if I'm going to be living in an area long for a job, it would make sense over something like getting a year-long lease or whatever if I wouldn't be able to fulfill it. I would have to reevaluate, but I'm still probably going to lean no. Because even still, it's not my most preferable thing right now. Like, the goal is to be in a house one day, or at least an apartment, because I do like apartment living. But you get the idea.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but do you have anything else? Because otherwise,
no, I am good. Tell me why this is potentially the last podcast episode ever.
Yeah, and not just of this podcast. To be clear, I'm saying of all podcasts.
Oh, damn.
But nah. All jokes aside, I was, going on a walk. I was taking my mom on a walk. She was on all fours. We had a leash on and everything.
Oh God, this is kinky.
But nah, all jokes aside, I went on a walk with her because, like, I could use the exercise, the vitamin D, the fresh air, all that. And when I was going on the walk, I was thinking, the last time I've really been on this walk was when I would call you for extended periods of time. And, we would both be going on walks, for a decent amount of time, but later on, you'd stay in your apartment.
Yeah.
But point being, I was just like, dang, like, it's been a long time since I've done that. And I'm like, now that we're doing the podcast and this is largely where we're having the context of our calls, I'm like, is that the last time we'll have ever done that? Answer is probably not, given, we're still pretty young. But just like, sometimes like the last time something passes and you don't really notice until like a long time later looking back on it. And so I'm just kind of thinking like, what are some significant things that you have done for the last time?
Well, you said that you weren't sure if this topic was going to be able to last or not, and I can tell you off of how I think this definitely will. I at least have a few things to say about it, because when you were living at the house in California with me as it was getting sold and all that stuff, I went out of my way, like when I was driving away to go to my dad's place before I flew to my mom's in Florida and, went to Korea and all of that stuff. I was like, this is the last time, whether I see this house or not, again, this is the last time that this will be my house, unless, I end up buying it years down the line. But I'm not assuming that it's going to happen. So I have actually tried to, with a lot of things in my life since, maybe first or second year of college, to just take it in and try to be aware of, like, if this is the last time or if it is potentially the last time that I'm doing something, because I don't know, it's just interesting. It's not like I feel terrible if I don't do that, but it's just like, oh, who would have thought that that was the last time that I ever talked to this person? Like, with you having left high school early and all that stuff, yeah. I'm sure there's some people who, like, the week that you left, you didn't think this is going to be the last time that I talked to insert person here, even though we were good friends, but it's been 6 years since you've talked to him before you know it. So it definitely is just an interesting thing to think about, like, shit, I never would have assumed that was the last time that I was going to eat Korean barbecue at that restaurant, but it was.
Yeah. It's kind of like, for me, existential dread. So I don't know if I like actually being, you're very cognizantly aware in those situations that is the last time.
I try to be anyway.
Yeah, but like, does that actually make you feel better? Because for me, it's like, I almost build it up in a way. So at the end of it, it's like, oh, I don't want to go. Like, even if I'm not having the best of time, it's like, I get a little bit of fear. Like, I will never see this thing again. Like, I don't know. Don't you get that or no?
To me, not a huge extent. Like, it can... I was going to say a comparison, but then I realized you wouldn't get the comparison, which was like graduating high school of...
graduated college.
I mean, a community, yeah. But,
wow.
Yeah, I'm throwing you under the bus. But, it's a feeling that even if you didn't graduate from high school, I'm sure you can understand, of like, there's some sad feelings of like, this has been such a big part of my life, not just high school, but all of the school prior to, because after high school, you don't have to go to college, you can just go to work, you can do this or that, and it's the last time that you'll be seeing all of your friends in the same place, unless you're like all going to the same college, all going to the military or something like that. So generally, it's the last time that you're going to have these experiences, but it's one of those things where you're also like, the thing that gives things in life value is the fact that they're finite. Like, if you could just live for 1,000,000 years, and it's like, okay, why do I gotta get in shape today? I have, give me 100 years and I still have 100 times 100. That's not, like, that's 1% of my life right there. So, it can feel bad, but, for me, it's kind of similar to, like, when you have a relative who passes away or something, and if there are in a hospital like my grandmother was, and you can kind of acknowledge, this is the last conversation I'm going to have with this person, this is the last time I'm going to see them while they're breathing or something. It feels bad because obviously you don't want them to pass on, but being able to have that closure makes it feel a lot more intentional and makes it feel like you have less regrets, at least for me, as opposed to like if you see your grandmother and then 4 years later you're like, oh, apparently she died, and you're like, oh, that's too bad. If I had known that the last time I was going to see her was 4 years ago, I would have like tried to ingrain it more, or make it feel more special. So that's how it is for me.
I do know exactly what you mean. I'm gonna kind of go through like two situations here. Like, I don't know, when my grandfather died, again, hospital kind of thing, I guess that seems like, people do die in hospitals. That's kind of the place to be.
Which grandfather? The one that gave you the car or the one that was a vegetable?
The one who gave me the car.
Okay.
And so, like, we did have a very intentional last conversation, and it was, like, very emotional because, like, regardless of how we felt about each other sometimes, he was probably the closest thing I had to a father figure in my life. So it's just kind of dramatic in a way.
Yeah.
And so, like, that did hit me hard for, like, when he died, like, it hit me hard for, like, months, like, really hard for a couple of months. But, like, my childhood dog, who I haven't seen in a few years, I found he died earlier in the week, and I loved that dog growing up. Like, he was, like, very much my dog, but because of various reasons, and in part my grandfather's passing, because the dog was kept in my grandfather's house, I haven't seen that dog since, well, my grandfather died when I was first going to UCI, so I haven't seen that dog in minimum 3 years. So, like, it was just kind of like, dang, like, I'm sad the dog passed, and, like, I loved that dog, but also, like, he's just not a part of my life. And so, like, that's the kind of situation where it's, like, a bit of regret in a way, because it's kind of like, it doesn't eat me up the same way, like, it would with my grandfather, but it's like, dang, if I knew it was going to be the last time, maybe I would have seen him more recently, like, maybe I would have visited him, like, a week ago or something, that kind of thing.
No, that is the weird thing about growing older, because you potentially, or most likely throughout the years, have more and more things that you care about or have cared about, and I don't think it's healthy, and I don't think it's very plausible to, like, actually, if you could, okay, this is the last time I'm going to see my dog, this is the last time this, like, if you tried to itemize every single thing, like, your life would just be full of trying to think of, is this going to be the last time, and, like, checking off if this was the last time, and then if it wasn't the last time, then you're like, how's your feeling of, like, shit, I already, said my goodbyes in my mind to, like, this dog, and now I'm seeing him again, like, do I have to do this every time I see the dog now, or what's the case?
Yeah, I don't know. Then it kind of, like, there's two thoughts that it actually gives me. One is kind of like the idea of, maybe there's little things you do every time. Like, one thing I hear is, like, couples sometimes will say, I love you at the end of every conversation, even an argument, because you never know if it'll be the last one. Like, it's a little cheesy, to be honest, but I get the sentiment, at least. But actually, ironically, what it made me think of, earlier you're mentioning, like, it's just the fact that there is a finality to it gives it some value, and, like, inherently. And it actually kind of made me think. Recently, I read the Steins Gate visual novel, and one of the alternate endings is that you choose to live in an endless loop of 2 days prior to one of the characters' deaths, and you do the same thing every single day for who knows how long, really. And the character eventually, like, gets bored of it. He doesn't even care for his friends anymore. They mean literally nothing. He starts actively engaging almost and wanting to see them hurt, because at least it's something unique. And obviously we aren't trapped in a time loop. It'll never get that severe. But just kind of funny thing, like, different perspectives of it. Like, what happens truly if there is no finality or time,
Yeah. No, it really is interesting as far as it goes, where, yeah, a lot of the thing that gives stuff value is the fact that it's finite, where if you have infinite of anything, like, the fact that you care about something is unintentionally almost always based on the fact that it's finite. If you have it infinitely, it, if not completely devalues, like, 99% of it does devalue.
Well, the thing is, funny enough, I think this goes on even beyond things of, like, time and almost sentimental value, because I'll give an example for me, and then I'll, give the floor to you, because there's one I know for sure for you, but I really enjoy Korean barbecue as a food, but I have it so often with a certain friend group that I almost borderline don't really even like it so much anymore sometimes, because it's like, there's always such an abundance of it. I just know, I have had it this week, probably gonna have it again in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it took something that used to be a very fun, special, like, occasion. It's just like, oh, this is normal now. So, like, it kind of lost. In that case, like, who knows? Maybe I have had it for the last time. I still wouldn't necessarily value it enough, because it just, like, got absolutely normalized for me. It's just kind of interesting. And then for you, you mentioned how money, if you won the lottery, you wouldn't even enjoy it.
Yeah, it's interesting, because for me, whenever I have, like, more and more money or things like that, like, when I have little money, I I don't care about it as much because I don't have anything, but then when I have too much money, I care about it because I'm like, oh, well, I can't lose the money. But then there's also the, like, switch versions of that of, like, if I have so much money that I can just do whatever I want, it's like, shit, the whole reason why I have a job is so I can earn money to do the things that I want. But whenever I've been in situations where I don't have to worry about money so I can do whatever I want, I feel fucking miserable, man. So, like, part of, it feels like you're a hamster running on a wheel where it's like, there is no end goal. There's the illusion of the end goal, but in reality, the thing that like keeps life somewhat entertaining is the fact that you're running on a wheel.
I was literally gonna like make that same conclusion because like without that wheel, like there's been various periods of time for you and me where we're either unemployed for various reasons or not going to school for various reasons or whatever, and it's just like it is miserable. You enjoy it for a little bit, but it's like the thought of summer break. Like summer break is fun for the first month or month and a half, but by the time you hit I don't know, that 2.5 month mark is like, can I just get back to school already?
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's something that a lot of people nowadays can relate to just because of COVID, whether it be work or school or whatever the case was. A lot of people got time off, or if they were still working, a lot less intense work measures during that time. And, like, I especially, when you were doing school online at my house, I wasn't doing school at the time. And for those, like, 3 or 4 months, I was just doing nothing. And especially, like, if I could hang out and do something fun with you every day, which, I mean, I guess hypothetically we could have. But, then maybe that would make things a bit better. But when it's just like my mom's still doing work, even if it's not in person, you're still doing school, for 10 hours a day, sitting in the one spot, and stuff like that. It's just like it is just me, and I can maybe if no one had to work, then it would be more entertaining. But like if you don't have to work and all of your friends and family do have to work, then it really is just like an isolating feeling of like, well, games no longer feel rewarding unless you absolutely love them, because you can just play a game whenever you want and like it all kind of bleeds together, and it's a shitty feeling.
It really is. I do have regret about how that went, like with school and everything, because if I just decided to it's COVID, I'll just take a break and hang out with my friend, we probably would have enjoyed it a lot more, but we also probably would have needed more money.
That's true, but I will also say that like the time that you lived at the house with me, which I think this is the case for both of us, not to say that it was necessarily the best time of my life, but if you're like putting out periods of like, top 10 like prolonged periods, yeah, it was just like, man, we had the sending horrible pictures to each other on Snapchat era. We were watching K-dramas at one point. I was watching you play games on the PS4. I forced you to play the Pokemon TCG with me at one point. Like of course there were some like boring moments, but I think that you and I had both talked about before that like we really did subconsciously understand really well with each other, of just like, yeah, he's working on stuff. Yeah, let's probably not bother him right now. And okay, this is a good time to hang out. Like, there's been other friends who I've lived with for extended periods of time, and some of them are either just completely boring or just complete like sensory overload, where you're like, I fucking hate you, get out of here. Where you lived with me for the longest period of time out of anyone, and there was never a moment that I was just like, shit, when is Jonathan gonna leave? It was just completely, and you were even there of just like, because we invited you to be there. There was no, like, rent being paid. There was no, like, I mean, you could have left anytime you wanted, and we could have made you leave anytime we wanted. So it's really proof that it was just a comfortable position.
Yeah, and I am really grateful to your mom for that. But it's just kind of interesting. I don't know. It's just like, let me think. It's just kind of interesting because if anything, the barriers that were in place for me, school and everything, probably helped us coexist a lot more, because I think if it really was just nonstop us interacting or not, it probably would have been harder, because I am extremely introverted, but I do kind of struggle with boundaries sometimes, like establishing them. So like I think the fact that I had a very concrete thing that I just had to do probably helped both of us coexist with one another. Because, like, you would know if I didn't want to hang out, it largely wasn't personal. It was just like, dude, I'm just fucking busy. And then for me, like, also, like, sometimes I would just get burnt out. It was like, well, that's okay, because I got this to do anyways.
Yeah, I will say that probably did help for sure. But also, you had your other friends that you would, like, play games with online, or that you would just talk to for, a couple hours and stuff like that. So even if the school thing did help with us distance a bit, I feel like just I could tell enough when you wanted to hang out with other friends, or just you and I both. I mean, even though we enjoy each other's company, we can probably understand of not wanting to spend 24 hours a day together. So I think it would have worked out decent enough. But you're probably right that school did help.
You're right, and I mean, and fundamentally, in many ways, we're pretty similar, but also in the ways that we're different. At least we telegraph it pretty well, so the other person can tell.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so that is pretty nice. Like, as far as how we feel, we do tend to have we tend to wear our emotions on our sleeves a lot of times, unless we have to, disguise them for various like professional reasons or whatever. But you get what I mean.
Yeah, for sure. But
But
oh, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, I mean, that's even a good subject right there about the last time you've done something. Like, do you think that's the last time you'll have lived with someone for like someone other than a romantic partner, or do you think maybe in the future that'll happen again?
I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a possibility. You and I have talked about potentially living together
Yeah.
to do YouTube podcasts, etc., just to hang out. So, I mean, it's always potential. And we're, in our early, mid-20s, whatever. So, there's still plenty of time in life for that stuff to happen. But not as much as living together with someone. I was actually just going to bring up, that was the last time that we'd seen each other. And considering since middle school, even when you dropped out of high school, we would still see each other at least once a month, I would say, between your parents, sometimes bringing you to pick me up and just coming over to my house to hang out and that stuff. But at this point, I mean, that was, June of 2020, the last time we saw each other. Now it's July of 2022. It's been 2 years, so I definitely don't think that will have been the last time that we saw each other.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, but, accidents happen and just life happens and all that stuff. And just, like I said, with me leaving the house, that was very obvious for me to say, like, this is the last time that I'm ever going to see this house, with it being my house. Next, if I do see this house again, it will probably be like, oh, hey, this was my childhood house. Can I come in and see it or something? Where with certain people like you and I or other things, like it might not be obvious if this is the last time you're going to see each other or hang out or whatever. And it definitely is just interesting to think of, like, shit, it's been 2 years since we've actually seen each other.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, and I want to kind of expand that to other people, right?
Mhm.
Like maybe there's people that you kind of like stopped talking to for various reasons. Sometimes there's an actual reason, sometimes it's just life drifts different ways.
Mhm.
But then like you kind of think, does it have to be the last time? Like is there a legitimate reason it has to be the last time? But then the thought of kind of like, oh man, we haven't talked in 3 years, it'd be kind of weird texting them.
Yeah, well, you and I both had that for a mutual friend of ours that we had in, like, middle school and high school.
Yeah.
I mean, the first name Matthew is generic enough that I can just say that. But, yeah, his name's Matthew, and I think he messaged us both on Discord one day. I'm just like, oh, I remember playing Trivial Pursuit with you guys, and, oh, it was so funny, and blah, blah, blah. And you and I were both like, oh, yeah, I'm glad that he reached out to us, but at the same time of just, like, will it feel weird to try to reconnect to him and all of this stuff of, like, he was a good friend, but it's hard to keep in contact with so many people, especially when you're no longer living in the same place or anything. So it does just feel weird of, like, will that have been the last time that we talked to him? Now that it's been, like, it was years since we had seen him, and it was years since we talked to him, and it was the one message. And I don't know. It definitely, people is the hardest thing to tell if it's going to be the last time, because you can go to a restaurant and be like, well, this is in Idaho and I don't live in Idaho, so yeah, this is probably the last time that I'll ever go here, the first and last time. But that doesn't have much sentimental weight, and it's easier to tell, where the last time that you talk to someone, especially if it's someone that you actually care about more than like a random stranger, it is hard to tell, and it does have a more emotional value, whether or not it is.
It really does. But then it's also with people, it's hard because it's like, wait, if it has been like 5 years, I don't know. I know my life and probably me as a person has largely changed in the past 5 years. Who knows what they've been up to? Like our bubble is so small. Maybe they're just fundamentally a different person in some ways.
Yeah. Like I've looked at. I didn't get a high school yearbook, but my grandma cross-stitched like a little graduation cap thing that people could sign on the outside, and then got it framed and all that stuff. And I got quite a few people to sign it. And at the time, I was thinking of like getting an associate's in business, then going to Austin, Texas to be a bartender, and maybe opening up my bar one day. So like some of the some of the things that people signed on the cross stitch was just like, hey, can't wait for you to serve me a drink one day in Texas and blah 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 and all of that stuff. And just like, I find it interesting because I made so few friends, actually 0 friends throughout college, and part of that is just because I feel like I had such close friends in high school, middle school, like you, like our other friend Matthew. We had multiple Matthews and stuff like that, but yeah, looking back now, it's like I've changed so much, and presumably they've changed, where even if they were exactly the same, I feel like I've changed enough where it's like, man, even if they're exactly the same, I might just not want to hang out with them anymore, just not care about it. I used to be a lot more eccentric and this and that. I would, steal my friend's pocket Bible, stand up on the lunch tables and preach it to people in a joking manner, where now it's just like, no, I'd feel like, man, you're such a dipshit. Like, yeah, it might be a little bit comedic, but it's too much work and this and that. And I don't know, maybe if the group mentality kicked in, it would be easier for me to get like that again. But I feel like I've just, I still do dumb things, but I feel like I've calmed down compared to how I was before, where it's just like certain relationships just would not work.
Yeah, like you would need them to have changed as well, but in a way that's compatible with how you changed. And just the thought of that, and then the social awkwardness of reaching out after years, it's kind of like, man, I kind of reminisce about talking to said person, and I kind of want to talk to them again, but I'm not gonna.
Yeah, actually, I think one of the perfect examples of this is before I went to Florida to finish up my last year of college online, there were a couple of friends that I did like go out of my way to be like, hey, this might be the last time that I see them, or at least for a while, because I was planning on going to Florida and then immediately going to Korea for an indefinite period of time. So I had no clue if it was going to be the last time, or, if the next time I saw them was going to be at a 10-year high school reunion or whatever. So there were Luke and Levi were the 2 brothers that I hung out with a lot during middle school and high school, so I went over to their place, and then I had a friend Ethan who I hung out with tons in middle school. He actually lived at my house for like 2 months, so he's one of the comparisons for you on that. And I saw all 3 of them. 2 of them were together though, of course, because they're brothers, and they hadn't changed at all since high school, which for me was a bad thing, because I wanted to talk to them about like, oh, how's college going, how's this and that, what are your plans for this, and they were just like, oh, let me show you this new game, and oh, Levi, you're being so stupid, oh, hey, let's do this, let's do that, oh, Yu-Gi-Oh this, and it's just like, it's cool if you're still into that stuff, but they had no desire to talk about like adult life, quote unquote, and just how things were going, and they were just like, oh, here are the new games that I've been playing recently, and cared 0 about like me going to Florida and starting my career in Korea, etc. So it just felt very like, man, I've known these guys since middle school, and I feel like I'm talking to the exact same middle schoolers. Where when I went over to my friend Ethan's house, he and we would make jokes that we had like running since middle school, because we went to different high schools and all that stuff, and certain things like picked back up like since then, and it was easy to joke around. But then we stayed up till like 4 or 5 a.m. of just like, okay, so Ethan, you're trying to be an actor. Like, obviously, that's not the easiest thing to do. So, what's your backup plan for this? What makes you want to try this so much? And we would have, like, those more, like, philosophical, existential, whatever kind of topics. And we could do both of those things. And obviously, it's not like I just snap and then changed my personality. I still have the dumbass me that bit your shoulder in the locker room in middle school still in me somewhere. But also, I have the Dylan who's like, hey, let's start a podcast because blah, 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 and all of that. So it's just nice if you can balance things out, and some people it's easier to do and some people it's harder to do.
Well, I feel like that duality is almost vital, because for me, I have never consistently maintained contact with anyone that I can't have that duality with.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, they're either just such a wet blanket, it's always such a significant thing with the person, it's always super serious, or they just never know how to take it serious. I'm like, maybe you're someone I'll drink with, but like, nothing more than that. So like without that duality, it's just, I don't know, there's just no connection there for me.
Yeah, I'm interested, because I gave quite a few examples, is there anyone that you have, like, a personal, like, strong feeling, whether it's the last time that you talked to them, and it might be the last time ever, or as far as people who have changed, or this, that? I know that you have a bit of a different experience, just because a lot of your high school friends you kind of dropped out of contact with just because you stopped going to high school, but then you do have the college friends. So I'm just curious, like, I don't want to hog the entire podcast with all my personal examples.
You're good. No, before I give an example, before I name drop someone, I'll actually kind of delve into what you mentioned a little bit. Since I graduated early.
Graduated, quote unquote.
Legally, I did. all jokes aside, um, that actually had a huge impact on me emotionally for like 2 or 3 years. Probably still does to an extent, because like my growing up wasn't the best, so I relied on my friends a lot, and they were, some of the best parts of my childhood. Like, I don't remember a lot of fun events. I don't remember owning a lot, but I remember the good times with my friends. So like it genuinely shook me, because I thought that those were people I was gonna at least keep in contact with for like a couple years after high school. But when like even 1 week after I left high school, like I had never heard from hardly anybody. I could list on one hand genuinely the number of people who reached out to me after I left, and those were the people who like I either did keep in contact with or wish I did. Because like that genuinely impacted me a lot. I was like, dang, our thing was solely a friendship based off of convenience, where I thought it was a lot more. And that's not to like say like shame on them for not valuing it. It's just like at that age I didn't recognize it, to where nowadays I'm a lot more aware of that, and I'm a lot more accepting of that, because that needs to happen. Not every relationship can be super deep, and you still do need connections that aren't super deep as well. But at the time, I didn't recognize that. So that genuinely did hurt and impact me a lot for a while.
Well, it's also hard just because like you said that, certain people that wouldn't reach out to you even after a week and stuff like that. But something that I've experienced, which I know that you, like, it's even a bigger thing for you, is even if there's people that you want to talk to, if they don't reach out to you, you almost refuse to reach out to them. Where there's certain friends which I'm sure that, like, you or I could still have be in contact with if they reached out enough to us. Like, why didn't we reach out to them if we're saying that, like, oh, I really wish that I kept in contact with this person? And, part of it might be fear of like unrequited stuff. Part of it is just because the effort can be too much. But like, even the reason why you and I stayed in contact is because I was calling you super frequently, and I don't know what drove me to do it, because I had certain friends in middle school who like, oh, he moved to Utah and I would call him once every couple months. But for you, I was just like, nah, fuck it, I'm calling you like at least once a week, and that kept up.
Actually,
and you
did answer.
Say again.
I actually did answer. We engaged a lot.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm just curious of, like, what drove me in that moment to, like, because if it happened again, like, with my personality right now and everything, I'm not sure if I would do the same thing, even if it was for you. Because, I mean, obviously, you and I are close enough at this point where it's impossible not to do that. But just saying, if we had the same relationship that we had back then, but currently, and then for some reason we were going our different ways, I'm not sure how well I would keep in contact. And it is just interesting, like, what at that moment drove me to do it, because obviously I'm very happy that I did, because our friendship was super close in high school. But like now it's less of a like, how long will we stay friends, and it's just like, unless something horrible happens, presumably we're going to stay in contact till we die, at least in my mind. So it's interesting of like, I wonder how many other people that are like, man, I really wish I stayed in contact with Jonathan, but he just didn't reach out to me enough, or I wish I kept in contact with Dylan, but he didn't reach out to me, so I never reached out to him. So it's interesting with just flipping those perspectives.
Kind of valuable, because I don't like I said earlier, we all have our own bubbles, but sometimes like trying to think how someone else feels, maybe there are people who want to keep in contact with us for all we know. And I know I probably didn't do my part, because I'm really good at reciprocating effort, but I'm not good at initiating.
Yeah.
So maybe there are friendships that I probably could have done my part to maintain. But I for what it's worth, I did reach out a few times to a few of the closer people, and I could just vibe out that maybe it wasn't going to work.
Gotcha.
But I will name drop one specific person. Not that anything went wrong, but just that I wish I kept in contact with. Name's common enough, and honestly, I'm only going to say good things here, so I don't mind if they ever hear this. But Melanie from high school.
Okay.
School. Because as far as I knew, I was one of the only people that actually got to know her in any real capacity outside of school. And I genuinely enjoyed her as a friend. She was always very fun, I don't know, supportive. And when I left, she was one of the very few people that actually reached out to me multiple times to like see how I was doing, see if I would, this was the brief period before I fully left, when I was like kind of in school, kind of not. She would ask, oh, are you coming in? And when I'd say no, she seemed to, wish that I'd say yes. So I was like, oh, she actually kind of appreciates me as a friend. That genuinely feels good. And I really never had anything bad to say about her. She was just a good friend. It's just, from what I heard, when she left high school, she kind of wanted to reinvent herself a little bit. So I wanted to respect that, even if I actually did end up seeing her later in college.
Yeah, because I did end up keeping in contact with her through like a year or a year and a half after high school, and I mean, they were decent conversations and they lasted a bit, but just like one of those things where, like you said about reciprocation, I would reach out to her and occasionally she'd reach out to me, but the reciprocation was like very low beyond that. So it was hard to keep it up, but I have one of the friends that I talked about still keeps in contact with her, and she's definitely one of those people who, just like how I say that I've changed a decent bit since high school, she's apparently also like, I mean, maybe in more personal things she's very similar, but as far as like her day-to-day life, from what I've heard, like certain things that I would not associate with high school her whatsoever are like completely her personality now. So it is just interesting of like whether it's intentional reinventing or if it's just like, hey, life happens and accidentally, turned out different ways. But yeah, I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's part of what I was saying with, like, maybe I don't want to reach out because they're just fundamentally a different person. Because the Melanie that I knew, I genuinely really appreciate as a friend, and I'm really happy that she, stayed friends with me, as long as she did, because I very much valued her company. But if she, who knows if we would vibe today? We're probably not going to find out.
Yeah, definitely not. I don't know. Maybe one of our podcasts later on could be, hey, I invited some random person that we dropped conversations with, and now they're thrown into... Dude, I definitely hate telling people that I have a podcast, which I basically have told no one other than my mom. But occasionally at work, someone would be like, oh, what do you do? Do you have any hobbies or this? And, somehow podcasts will come up. And I just feel embarrassed because it's one of those stereotypes of just like, oh... middle 20s white guy who has a podcast with his friend that has, like 5 average views on YouTube. That sounds like a stereotype right there.
I mean, I don't think stereotypes are necessarily bad, but yeah, it's a bad connotation for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Hey man, check out my podcast. Don't forget to download on Spotify. Woo!
Oh God. Oh man. Well, keeping on the subject, I actually wanted to kind of like twist it a few different ways. I thought of a few alternatives. So one was, what is something that you haven't done, but that you wish, that you would do or had done when you were younger, for example?
As far as like viewing it as the last time or just anything?
Well, think of it like rather than doing something for the last time, what's something you would want to do for the first time?
Oh, want to do something for the first time. Well, part of that something that
or something you wouldn't want to do for the first time.
Well, there's many things for that, but yeah, one thing for me that I even told you about that I'm planning to do is I've always been really interested in different combat sports and that stuff, and you and I did wrestling together in high school, and we dropped for different reasons, you for health reasons and me because it was essentially do cardio for 4 hours or 3 hours 4 days a week and then do wrestling for 1 hour on Friday. So I just hated that like the quote-unquote combat sport was just cardio, which I understand cardio is important, but like if I'm joining it because I find the sport entertaining, like cardio definitely was not my favorite thing. But one that I've always been more interested in than wrestling was boxing. And I'm not doing that yet. It's something where I want to save up money because definitely that's not the cheapest thing to do. And whether I take off time from work for it or not, we'll see, because it can also be a big time commitment. But that's something that I've always, like, since middle school, been like, I'd watch Hajime no Ippo, the anime, and all of stuff like that, and just different things. A lot of my interests do come from anime and manga and weeb shit. But I just see so many things and be like, man, I really want to try boxing. Man, I really want to try karate. Man, I really want to, UFC or stuff like that. And even if I don't go anywhere with it and I only try it for like a month and give up, I at least want to try it and give it my all. And I understand that cardio is going to be a part of it and all that stuff, but at least there's more techniques that I can, even if punching a heavy bag is cardio and all of that stuff, but at least it's practicing the technique where we weren't, single underlegging, whatever the fuck they were called, back and forth as cardio. It was just literally running. We were essentially the track club, which occasionally did wrestling. So boxing boxing is one thing for me that I definitely have always wanted to try, but never have actually given it the chance. But I decided to no, I'm setting money aside, and by this time next year, I am absolutely joining, at least for a 2-month split that I can pay $1,000 for or something.
No, that's fair, but now I'm going to kind of flip it a different way of, why now rather than earlier? Or later, for that matter.
Well, one thing earlier is that combat sports are something that my mom never was big on, especially when she had a bit more of her, issues earlier in my life. So it's something where probably not the easiest thing to bring up. Also, with school being full time and you can't necessarily take a break from that. I mean, I guess during the summer if you want to dedicate yourself to that. But also, my family was a bit tight on income during high school, so spending $1,000 on a boxing thing, especially if I'm not fully motivated to do it as a wishy-washy high schooler, might have been hard. And then why not later? I mean, boxing is something where apparently there are people who have gone through boxing into their early 50s or something, but generally the lifespan of a boxer is 4 to 5 years from what I see, and most boxers retire in their late 20s or early 30s. So it's something where, not to say that I can't do it later in life, and not to say that I'm necessarily going in with the goal of being a professional, but if I could do a real match, an amateur match or something, I'd totally be down for that. And I think it's easier to do that as a at the time I would be 24-year-old, if I started next year, rather than doing it as a 35-year-old.
Yeah, that's fair. Plus, your body's just gonna recover a lot more easily now.
Yeah, exactly. But what about you? Are there any specific things that have stuck out for you of just man, I've always wanted to try that, but I've never actually done it?
Ironically, I'm gonna go for one that I don't want to do just because there's something off the top of my head, and
podcasting.
This one. Oh God, yeah, that's one thing I wish I never did. Oh, that's actually a way we could take this, but not. This is one that maybe you can talk me out of, given you have done this. Honestly, this is probably gonna be an unpopular opinion. I don't really want to go to a concert, in all honesty.
Oh yeah. Honestly, I don't want to talk you out of that, because from the concerts that I've gone to, because I've gone to a lot of K-pop concerts primarily, and you and I both we're not the dancing type, and we're not the screaming fan of just oh my god, it's, this person. So, the live music aspect, I think, would be really nice. So, I went to a concert, I guess it wasn't huge by any means, but for this Korean rap hip-hop duo Mad Clown and San E, and as opposed to the giant Hollywood Bowl things that I'd gone to where I'd seen Red Velvet and different people like that, for them it was at a club in LA, so there were probably 200 people in the thing, and some people were up front and cheering, but I was just sitting on the side of a table and listening to the stuff, and that was super chill. So I think that if you could find smaller, more indie groups, or just people who have less of an appeal, or at smaller venues, I would say it's worth to go, because one, it will probably be cheaper and less scalped, and then two is that there's less of that super woo you gotta dance, or woo you gotta you gotta scream and fangirl kind of thing. But yeah, if you're talking about big groups, because I know that you and I both quite a few big groups, whether it's the more K-pop ones or whether it's the more heavy screamo things that you like,
which it would be for me.
Yeah, I think both of those are just the community at those things for big concerts are not going to be something that you enjoy very much.
That's what I was honestly thinking, because I kind of just want to vibe to the music, but I'm not seeing that happening at K-Con. And then if I go to a metal screaming concert, I'm probably gonna get beat up in a mosh pit or something.
Probably.
I'm kind of tiny, so I'd rather not. So I'm just thinking I don't know, I really liked SoundCloud era emo rap, but that scene and the rappers are largely dead. So I don't know. I was what's realistically left? There's the emo scene, but that's kind of nah. Really, all I'm left with is I do like some indie pop, and that one I might be down to go to a concert. I could see people there being more willing to just vibe out and listening to the music.
Yeah, I don't know, but if there's anytime someone that we both like enough that when we're in the same state that is actually doing something, and it doesn't seem like it will be a huge venue, then we could definitely go.
So many qualifiers.
Hey man, I kind of have to for this situation.
You're right, but yeah, so that's something that I haven't done, that I don't necessarily really want to do, but I'll take you up on that if the offer goes up.
With all those qualifiers?
Yeah, with all those qualifiers. But I don't know. are there any other things, like, or maybe something you have done that you're glad is the last time you've done it? Probably for you, a few of the jobs you've had in the past.
Absolutely, food service, 100%. God, I hope it's the last time that I had to do this. But
It doesn't only be a sad feeling.
yeah. Well, one thing that does pop into my head that I've never done that I really want to do is I lived in Korea. I visited Korea several times before I lived there, but I've never visited Japan, and I really want to. And that's something that I've thought of now that I have a job that I'm able to save up a decent amount of money with. Whether it's you, whether it's one of our friends, Matthew, just I'd be totally down to go to Japan, especially with a friend, because to me, like if I'm going around by myself, there's a lot less intention, even if it's a place that I want to go to, where I just have an easier time having fun if I have someone with me.
Yeah, that's fair, because like you can't really share the experience with anyone and like banter back and forth. Like you could still absolutely enjoy it, but I don't know. I am a massive introvert and I love my solitude, and I feel even I might struggle a little bit with that.
I don't know. I feel like I could probably force you into going with me.
Oh no, going with you for sure. I'm saying like going on my own would be a
Oh,
struggle.
yeah, absolutely. Going on your own. I could never imagine you doing that.
Yeah. Also just because of money, but going with friends, yeah, no, I don't know. Japan's been on my bucket list. I mean, there are good amounts on my bucket list. I'll get to it one day, supposedly.
Yeah, supposedly. But, yeah, as far as things that, like, I'm glad that are over with, school to an extent. I mean, school takes less time than work, as long as you're doing bullshit majors like I did, like communications and business. So, I mean, that was nice, but the fact that you're not making any money, and especially in college, you're losing money for going there, and it's things that generally aren't interesting, I'm glad that presumably I'm done with school. Like, maybe I'll go back for a major or something for a master's at some point, but I'm hoping that it doesn't come that I need to do that. But glad that that's done. Glad with the jobs that I've finished that I don't have to do anymore. But yeah, beyond that, there's nothing that sticks out in my head. Maybe just because I've blocked it, but nothing that I'm just like, man, I'm glad I never have to do this shit again.
It's fair. Off the top of my head, this is kind of I'm kind of pulling a little bit at straws here, but I'm glad I don't really have to live without having a car again, because I need that freedom. At least you're in a city where it has better public transportation, but like, oh my god, the thought of not being able to do what I want when I want sounds awful. I don't know how I did that for like 18 years.
Yeah, that definitely is something where it is just interesting thinking about back in like high school or middle school of like, I want to go to the mall with my friends. Mom, can you drive me to the mall with my friends? And then maybe sometimes you carpool, and maybe sometimes 5 people come, 5 moms come to drop them off or something. And yeah, the freedom that public transportation or a car brings, because in California public transportation is shit, but I'm living in Boston right now, and luckily public transportation is pretty decent.
Yeah, no, you're really lucky. Could you imagine the times we would have had if child labor laws were relaxed so we can make money and we could just hang out, drive, get a pint as 10-year-olds?
Oh my god.
Ooh, but
But yeah, for you, is there anything else that you're glad that is over with, or things that you do want to do, or anything else?
let me think about it. Honestly, this is, again, a little bit of a stretch. It's more of like what I have available now. But I'm glad that I finally have a competent computer, whereas before I didn't. So I guess I'm glad to have over with having the most anemic, worthless computer ever.
That's true.
Because now it's just like the avenues are limitless. I have a homework beast right now, but it's just like, I don't know, I could emulate games. I can totally legally watch things I pay for online.
I like how you emphasize totally illegal on that, but not totally whatever, the emulating games, because that's totally legal as well.
Should I try to justify this? I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna go for it. Like, if I buy shows online, I think the company can still profit for it. I don't think that anyone is profiting off of me. Like, I guess secondhand sellers, but point being, the publishers are not profiting because they aren't even selling it. That's my justification.
Fair enough, I guess.
So yeah, I totally legally watch things online that I pay for. Or it's just like being able to play video games. Honestly, just being able to do these calls. Like, I could do Discord on my other computer, but like not much else at the same time. Whereas now I can Google in Discord. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's amazing.
No, it must be nice because I do remember, like, when you and I were playing games together in high school, I didn't even have a powerhouse of a gaming computer, but I had, I had a cheap one. It was like $500 or something, but it was still able to, I mean, it could run League of Legends and shit like that. And you and I would play Risk of Rain together. And if we, like, didn't kill the final boss on the first thing and you could, like, loop around to make it harder and more enemies and all that stuff, your computer would almost always crash before we got to the final boss the second time around.
I always felt so bad for you. It's like, oop, I guess that's the end.
Yeah. I mean, it was still fun, but yeah, it definitely was like, we're not finishing this when we finish this. We're finishing this when Jonathan's computer decides it's done.
It's just such a buzzkill, too. It's like, I guess we're ending it here. Like, there's nothing satisfying at the end of it.
Yeah, but something that I do want to bring up, which I feel like should be the final thing, unless you got something that you want to get in there beforehand. So obviously, if we're talking about finalities and all that stuff, I mean, or starting things that we'd always wanted to do, we started this podcast as something that we had talked about, like, hey, if we are not happy with our jobs, let's move in together 2024 and start a YouTube channel, or, oh, hey, we have such long, fun conversations, this. So I'm just curious what your opinions are on, like, finally having started this, even if we're not super consistent or high quality with it, and how long this will last. Do you think that, I mean, this is going to be what, episode 4 or 5? Like, do you see this lasting, like, yeah, this is simple enough, we can do this for years down the line, or just like, it's not going anywhere, we lose the motivation, we have to change our call format a bit, so fuck it, let's, end it after episode 10 or something. Like, what are your opinions on the start and end of this?
Yeah, well, this does actually really well address the cliffhanger that I had at the start that I totally forgot about. Uh-huh. So thank you for bringing that up, actually.
Yeah.
But point being, yeah, so it's just kind of interesting because I am enjoying this. It is kind of interesting in that the talks, it's weird. They are intimate, but also less intimate in some ways. Like, we are obscuring some details or avoiding certain subjects. This episode, we opened up a bit more, even gave specific names. Mm-hmm. But point being, it's just like, I've been enjoying it so far, and until I feel an actual need, like, maybe we'll just skip a week if it really comes down to it, but until I feel that they're so unsatisfying, it's actually obscuring some element in the friendship, I feel like, I don't know, it seems fine enough. It seems like a good way of keeping us in contact, and otherwise, I'm not sure if my life at the moment is generally super interesting to hold up conversation on its own.
Fair enough.
Like, working full-time, then doing school almost full-time in terms of units, it doesn't leave me a ton of time for fun stuff, but this has been actually a pretty good way of circumnavigating that, so I could see it going on for quite a while, at least.
Yeah, for sure. And I do find it interesting with this, or whether, like, I got my mom to write a blog for a bit and stuff like that, of just being able to look back of, even if we, stay a year from now, 5 viewers every episode or whatever, half of them just being us.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. Just looking back and being like, oh, but there is video, or really audio, even if it's YouTube with the video, and proof and, like, recording of, here's, 52 conversations that we've had, or things like that. And I do think it's really interesting to just be able to look back on, like, even if we hate listening to our own voices, of, like, we absolutely can, hey, what were we talking about at that time? Was that a good conversation? Like, do we still feel the same way? And it's just cool to be able to look back on stuff.
Yeah, it's also like an era kind of thing. Like, we mentioned the era of us living together. Maybe this is the era of podcasting. Who knows? Maybe it just does go on indefinitely, or maybe one day after the podcast we'll look back on the last time we had a podcast episode.
Yeah, exactly. So it is interesting with that. But, and not to turn this into the beginning of episode 1 where it's just a podcast talking about podcasts, but that's more like the viewpoint on the finality of it. But did you have any specific feelings with, like, beginning this? Because even though we hadn't always been talking about podcasts, we had talked about for a long time of, like, doing some YouTube thing together, you dressing up in a Garfield suit and going to get lasagna from every...
No, we're going to have to bleep that out. No one's going to steal my idea.
Okay, just shit like that. So yeah, I'm just curious, even if this isn't like a big project of ours by any means, it still is, we finally started working on something together and posting it together. Did you have any specific, like, strong feelings about it, or just like, this isn't big, so who gives a shit about it?
Well, ironically, I probably have stronger feelings about it now than I did when we started. Because when we started, to be 100% honest, I felt basically nothing. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll just talk. Yeah. Like, it's like we've mentioned, this is literally what we already do. We're just actually recording it. So, like, I felt next to nothing. But now that we're actually, like, I want to say 5 episodes in, I think because we haven't posted the 4th or something. I don't know. Point
Yeah.
being,
But by the time that we post this, it will have been posted.
yeah, there we go. But point being, it's just like the thought that it's a lot easier to consume content than create content. And granted, this is like bare minimum effort.
Yeah.
But point being, at least we're making something. So at the end of it, we have something to look back on. Like, oh, hey, we have a lot of conversations, and we actually have something to look back on. Kind of. Now that we're a few episodes in, I'm like, oh, hey, it's kind of allowed me to do things we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. Like the dating reality episode. I would never have done that with you and scripted all that for fun, just for a casual conversation. So it's actually kind of interesting. It's allowing a creative outlet that I've kind of been appreciating a little bit.
Okay, I mean, I'm glad to hear that. And I've been finding it entertaining as well, because it's something where I even think of, like, okay, this Sunday's coming up. Like, I got to make sure of, like, yeah, I got to do the laundry, I got to do this, but I have to, what time am I going to talk to Jonathan? Because we got our podcast to do.
And throughout the week, like, I'm kind of thinking, I should probably come up with an idea for the podcast. And then it's like Saturday night. I'm like, boom, got it.
Procrastinating with school, procrastinating with this.
Always. But it's been turning out so well so far.
Yeah. So I'm enjoying it, but unless you got anything left with that, I think we can probably cut it here.
Nah, I am comfortable cutting it here.
All right, then. Well, till next week. Ta-ta for now.
Toot toot for news.
I hate you.